This is an incredibly storied place in that tale of connections between the African American community and the Northeast, because this is the place where Frederick Douglass, perhaps the most famous abolitionist of the 19th century, lived for a while with the Richardson family, a Quaker family in the Northeast who were very active in many progressive causes, but particularly the anti-slavery and abolitionist movement. But it wasn't just Frederick Douglass who came here. Lots of the fugitive slaves who were busily crossing backwards and forwards across the ocean, talking about the need to abolish slavery, many of them came through this house at 5 Summerhill Grove.
And so for people who may not be familiar with it, tell us a little about the abolitionist movement.
Okay, basically that's a transatlantic movement to try to secure the end of slavery in the United States and indeed across the globe. The slave trade had been abolished in 1808 at the beginning of the 19th century, but slavery still endured, particularly in the American South. And so the abolitionist movement was determined to try to exert pressure, moral and economic pressure, to try to eradicate slavery.
So how was it that Mr. Douglass ended up here?
He came to Britain in 1845, having escaped as a slave. He'd gone up through Canada and he'd been in New York, and he came across really as a major celebrity. I think we sort of underestimate just the power of someone like Douglass, who genuinely was revered around the Atlantic world. And he was on a tour. He went to Ireland, he went to Scotland, he went through Britain, but he kept coming back to the northeast of England because there was such a vibrant tradition of radical politics, of which abolitionism was an important part. So he felt at home here. He felt he was in the company of friends, people who thought much the same as he did around the great issues of the day. Not just abolitionism, but women's rights and political rights and other kinds of progressive causes.
And why does this matter to the city now?
You know, I think one of the things about the northeast of England is it has this reputation as having what we might call cultures of welcome, where various racial, ethnic and religious groups have traditionally been welcomed here. And that is a live tradition. And it's one that needs constant nourishment and replenishment, because there are also, in that sort of long story, many incidences of outbursts of racial animosity. It would be foolish and naive to pretend that racism isn't still alive and well. However, I think one of the things that Douglass's visit and his relationship with the city does is it enables us to sort of revisit and draw sustenance and inspiration from a moment of interracial dialogue where actually people work together for progressive causes.
And so as a final word, were he still here today, what do you think his message would be?
You know, one of the things that Douglass emphasized time and time again as an uneducated slave who had to teach himself to write and then became such a powerful orator, such a powerful writer, was the power of education. He saw the power of education as being able to uplift the individual, to cement the bonds of a community, but also just to erase ignorance. And, you know, clearly one of the root causes of racism and all other kinds of intolerance and bigotry is simply ignorance. And so education is vital.